The first text my brother sent after my wedding said, "Hope the community center had decent food at least." That was it. No congratulations. No apology for not showing up. Just that. I remember staring at my phone while my wife danced with my niece under cheap string lights in a rented church hall that smelled faintly like coffee and old carpet. And honestly, that text hurt more than the empty chairs did. Because empty chairs can still leave room for excuses. Traffic. Emergencies. Life. But that message told the truth plainly. My family skipped my wedding because I was poor. Or more specifically, because they thought poverty was contagious. At the time, I was 28, working maintenance for an apartment complex outside Tulsa while trying to keep my small remodeling business alive on weekends. My wife, Elena, taught second grade. Together, we made enough money to survive and just barely enough to dream. My family hated that. Not Elena. They actually liked her. They hated what our life represented. My older brothers, Damien and Cole, both worked for my father's commercial development company in Dallas. Nice suits. Company cars. Steakhouse meetings where everybody talked loudly about growth. My father worshipped money in this quiet, polished way that made it sound respectable. He never directly called me a failure. That would have been easier. Instead he used tone. Concern. Little comments disguised as advice. "You're too smart to struggle like this, Carter." Or, "You need stability before marriage." Yeah. That didn't sit right even back then. The worst part was how subtle the disrespect became over time. When we announced our engagement, my mother asked if we planned to wait until things improved financially. When we didn't, she sighed like somebody hearing bad weather reports. Then came the RSVP excuses. Damien had a business conference. Cole's wife suddenly had migraines. My parents claimed Dad couldn't travel because of back pain. Funny thing about that? 3 days later, my aunt posted Facebook photos of them all at a luxury resort in Arizona. Poolside cocktails. Big smiles. Matching sunglasses. While Elena and I cut our wedding cake beside a folding table covered in plastic gold cloth. I remember seeing those pictures during our honeymoon in a cheap cabin near Broken Bow Lake. Elena looked over my shoulder quietly and said, "Well, now we know." That was the thing about her. No drama. No bitterness. Just clarity. I loved her for that immediately. Still do. I wish I could say I handled everything with maturity from the beginning. Truth is, I spent years carrying that humiliation around like something hot in my chest. Every holiday felt weird after that. Every family dinner had this invisible stain on it. Nobody mentioned the wedding directly, which somehow made it worse. My father would ask about work in the same tone people ask about recovering injuries. "You still doing handyman projects?" Meanwhile, Damien got treated like a future senator because he negotiated commercial contracts nobody actually understood. I learned to stay quiet. Observation became survival. That's something people underestimate about the family member who gets dismissed constantly. You notice everything. Who interrupts who? Who gets respected automatically? Who gets tolerated? And over time, I noticed something important. My brothers weren't actually smarter than me. They were just louder. 8 years passed. A lot changed. Elena and I worked ourselves half to death for a while. Nights. Weekends. Cheap coffee and stress headaches. But slowly, the remodeling business grew. Then property restoration. Then commercial renovation contracts after a tornado hit parts of Oklahoma and our crew responded faster than bigger companies. Word spread. Reliable matters more than flashy eventually. By year 8, Carter Hale Restoration operated across 3 states with 40 employees. Nothing glamorous. Just solid work and a reputation for finishing jobs correctly. Meanwhile, my father's development company started struggling quietly. Bad investments. Overextended projects. Rising interest rates. The kind of problems arrogant men think confidence can solve. Then came the phone call. Dad wanted to meet. Not at the house. Not for dinner. At his office downtown. That alone told me things were serious. I arrived 15 minutes early because old habits die hard. The office looked different than I remembered. Less energy. Fewer assistants moving around pretending urgency was success. Dad stood near the window when I walked in. Older. Smaller somehow. Carter, he said quietly. No handshake. That was new. He motioned toward the conference table where Damien and Cole already sat looking exhausted. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't family. This was business. Dad cleared his throat. We've got liquidity problems. There it was. Straight to the point. Several major projects had stalled simultaneously, he explained. Banks were tightening. Investors were nervous. And then Damien finally said the sentence I honestly never expected to hear in my lifetime. We need help. The room went completely still after that. I looked at my brothers carefully. Guys who skipped my wedding because the venue embarrassed them. Guys who spent years acting like my work was temporary. Now sitting across from me asking for rescue money. Life's timing can get almost disrespectful sometimes. I leaned back slowly. What kind of help? Cole slid financial packets across the table. Partnership buy-in, he said carefully. Short-term stabilization. I flipped through the numbers quietly. And honestly, the situation looked worse than they admitted. Several properties overleveraged. Contractor disputes. Delayed payments everywhere. But underneath all that, I noticed the real issue. Pride. Nobody in that room actually knew how to scale down. They only knew expansion. My father watched me carefully while I reviewed documents. Then he made the mistake. You've done well for yourself, he said. Considering where you started. Considering. There it was. That little tone again. Even now. Even desperate. Guy still couldn't help himself. I closed the folder calmly. You skipped my wedding because I was broke. Nobody spoke. Cole looked down immediately. Damien rubbed his jaw uncomfortably. Dad sighed. That was a long time ago. No, I said quietly. It was a very specific time ago. Silence again. Heavy silence. I continued before anybody could interrupt. You know what bothered me most? It wasn't the money stuff. It was realizing my family saw struggle as something shameful. Dad straightened slightly. We wanted better for you. No, I said calmly. You wanted impressive. That landed hard. Because everybody at that table knew it was true. For a second, nobody moved. Then Damien surprised me. I should have come, he said quietly. No excuses. No performance. Just honesty. Honestly, that hit me harder than Dad's silence did. I looked out the conference room windows toward downtown traffic crawling through afternoon rain. 8 years earlier, I probably would have enjoyed this moment. The reversal. The power shift. But sitting there now, mostly I just felt tired. Tired of old wounds still trying to survive. Finally Dad spoke again. We made mistakes. That was huge for him. My father treated accountability like it physically hurt. I nodded once. Yeah, I said softly. You did. Then I slid the financial packet back across the table. And that's when the room got tense again. Because they thought I was about to reject them. Instead I said, "Your numbers are terrible." Damien almost laughed from stress alone. "But the company's still salvageable if somebody starts making decisions without ego." Dad stared at me carefully. "You'd help us?" I thought about Elena dancing under those cheap wedding lights years earlier. Happy anyway. Unafraid anyway. Then I thought about all the years I wasted wanting approval from people who only respected success once it became expensive enough. "I'll help conditionally," I said. Dad frowned slightly. "What conditions?" "You step down from daily operations." That one hit like a car crash. Cole blinked immediately. Dad's expression hardened. "You think you can run my company?" "No," I said calmly. "I think your company survives if somebody finally stops treating pride like strategy." Nobody argued with that. Because nobody could. 3 months later, restructuring started officially. Downsizing. Debt negotiation. Asset sales. Messy process. Necessary process. And for the first time in my life, my father actually listened when I spoke instead of waiting for louder voices. Last Christmas, the whole family gathered at Elena's and my house. Smaller place than my parents used to own. Warmer too. At one point Dad stood quietly in our kitchen watching Elena laugh with our daughter while Christmas music played softly in the background. Then he looked at me and said something I never expected to hear. "You built a better family than I did." Simple sentence. Quiet voice. But after everything? Yeah. That was enough.